Okay, making up a new vowel.
A
Okay.
listener requested we discuss this.
Okay, so this is kind of getting into you know where.
That's Linguistics Corner.
Yeah, that's right.
Again?
I guess there's two in this episode. We
Wow.
weren't actually planning that.
That's fine, though.
Yeah.
A-E-U,
Best Linguistics Corner. Anyway, so making up a new vowel. Yeah, basically, for context. Okay, so vowels exist in sort of what you can think of as a vowel space defined by 2 or 3 parameters. Like, and I say 2, I'll get to why I say 2 or 3. Okay, so basically, it's kind of convenient that the way you articulate vowels actually corresponds pretty intuitively to the first and second formant, which
You want to explain what those are?
yeah, basically. So if you have a sound happening in a tube, or I say a sound, like if you have like a sound that has a range of frequencies in it, basically the frequencies that correspond nicely to sort of integer multiples of the tube length. It's slightly more complicated than integer multiples. Sometimes it's integer into half.
Yeah.
It depends on if the tube functions as having an open or closed end. If you know about like string vibration, it's like having a fixed node or a non-fixed node. It's exactly the same dynamic. But anyway, yeah. So basically, it will some frequencies will be resonant and will effectively get amplified because the waves will kind of overlap themselves in a way that causes constructive interference, and then other frequencies will experience destructive interference. So basically the shape of your mouth when you say a vowel is creating conditions to magnify specific formants or to sort of move where the formant peaks are in frequency. So generally vowel space is charted on a sort of rectangle, or sometimes it's more of a trapezoid that gets narrower towards the bottom. But like, so
A zoid?
isn't that like an anime or something?
I have no idea.
Yeah, anyway. There's this old anime. I've heard the name. I know Chobits is a thing that exists. Can
What
I tell
is
you
it?
anything?
No
I
one
think
knows.
There's robots. I think there might be some kind of robot
do
girls.
They have boobs?
I mean, it's
Probably.
Do anime girls have boobs? There's a decent chance.
Sometimes.
Could be. Yeah. So basically, height is one parameter. I think that corresponds to like F1. I think. And so, for example, the high vowels. There's other terminology that calls them close vowels because your tongue is close to the roof of your mouth, but I've always found that to be more confusing to discuss. So the high vowels are like, for example, E and U are high, and like literally your tongue is near the roof of your mouth when you make those. Because they're vowels, it's not at the roof of your mouth, because if you have an actual closure, that's no longer counts. That's not a vowel anymore. Vowels have to be able to be continuous. Like you have to hold them like Yeah, they're in the group of sounds called continuance, which I think is a pretty good name. It's pretty self-explanatory. Other examples, like fricatives, are also continuance, so are nasals. So you can go or and then basically the other parameter is frontness, how far front or back your tongue, the part of your tongue that's articulating the sound is. So like, for example, U and O are back vowels, while E and A are front vowels. Also, and something that's sort of by default the case in most languages is that the back vowels tend to be rounded, which that's the third parameter, basically lip rounding, which kind of corresponds to F3, the third formant, but it's a little more complicated because some other things of your tongue position can also affect that. But so languages do. So by default, most languages have the back vowels are rounded and the front vowels are unrounded. Anyway, so basically the vast majority of languages around the world have like 5 or 6 vowels. That's where the peak of the distribution is, definitely. Yeah, so basically like the sort of what I would call the like sort of, if you know the vowels in like Spanish or Hawaiian or Japanese or Latin, like basically A, E, I, O, U, but not pronounced like that. A, E, O, U. Basically, those are a very, very common 5 set. But yes,
They're spaced out nicely, right?
yeah, basically. So a general tendency in vowel space, and its vowel space is continuous, which isn't really the case with most consonants. So, of course, for practical reasons, you kind of have to round to the nearest symbol that exists because we can't have a symbol for everywhere in a continuous space, obviously. Yeah. So there's definitely sort of rounding going on. You can indicate, there's various diacritics you can add to be like, this is like an A, but it's a little lower, a little higher or whatever, but a little further back, a little more central. But yeah, and then so, yeah, some languages have front rounded vowels. A good example is French. It has like, that's like an E plus lip rounding. I might not be producing that great. I'm not the best at front rounded vowels, but yeah, so basically.
So you could come up with a new vowel if you wanted to, right?
I
you
guess
just pick a point in the space.
Yeah, basically it's kind of a relatively even grid through vowel space.
You mean like IPA symbols, kind of?
The symbols that exist. Yeah, sorry, that's what I mean. And yeah, generally, basically languages like to have, for however many vowel sounds they have, they like them to be as far apart as possible, to like, I guess, avoid confusion in hearing people talk, probably. I mean, it's kind of for practical reasons. So, like, you know, if you have like, let's say you had a language that had like this set of 5 at the kind of, they're kind of at the, I said it's kind of a trapezoid. So basically, U and E are at the top corners, A and O are, that's written. When I say A, it's confusing to talk about in English. It's written as a lowercase normal E, like the letter, but the sound it represents is literally the sound A, and so that's like A and O are kind of midway down the sides, and then A, like written as an A, is down at the bottom, sort of middle-ish.
And how about schwa?
So schwa is like the neutral vowel, so that's right there in the middle. So if English only had 5 vowels, there'd be a good candidate to add, which would be schwa. But unfortunately, Germanic languages
have so many
are
fucking vowels.
Weird and will have like 14 vowels.
Right. So it's not English specifically. Other Germanic languages.
Yeah, it's not just English. It's generally a Germanic thing that there's just a lot of vowels, and like so in English, it's kind of like, oh man, how do you find a vowel doesn't exist in some dialect? Because English also, it's so inconsistent from dialect to dialect, like what vowels they have.
It might be a bit of a tricky hunt.
Yeah, I might actually have to do research and come back next week and...
Yeah, we can talk about it more.
Okay.
And also, didn't you know a guy in college who was weird about schwa?
I didn't know him.
Sorry, meet. Encounter
is the right word.
Okay.
There was like a guy, he wasn't a student. He was just a random middle-aged man who had come by linguistics classes and leave inexplicable pamphlets about like the letter schwa being somehow connected to God or something. I didn't really get it, to be honest with you. I think he thought linguists would be more sympathetic to it, but they weren't, because it was completely incoherent.
Okay.
I think he really thought he had something though. I gotta be honest, I fear for that type of guy talking to ChatGPT. God.
Yeah, that's concerning. You know what I say about that?
So true.
Uh-huh.